Hey, Soul Stories fam! We're about to begin a brand new love journey. Please comment on where you're watching from so we can see that our Soul Stories family is all around the world. The light from the lavish crystal chandeliers poured down, making the entire restaurant hall sparkle like a palace. Gentlemen in tailored suits, ladies draped in elegant evening gown. They sat laughing, chatting, raising glasses of shimmering red wine. Everything radiated wealth, power, and distance. But in one corner of the table sat a small, trembling figure, as if she didn't belong here at all. Ella Bennett. She sat there, her hands clutching an old fabric bag so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The simple light blue dress hugging her slender frame made her stand out awkwardly among the sea of glittering gowns. In the golden light, she looked like a wildflower trapped in a garden of aristocratic roses. Why was she here? Why had she agreed to come? The simple answer, because of her so-called friends. But did they really see her as a friend, or just someone to turn into a laughingstock? Trust us, this time will be different. He's handsome, rich, and he'll definitely surprise you. That's what they said, their eyes gleaming, their smiles too sweet to be real. Ella had believed them, or rather she had run out of excuses to refuse after dodging so many times. And now here she was, sitting in the most luxurious restaurant in the city, feeling like an outcast, waiting for a man she had never met. A blind date, but in her heart, Ella was beginning to suspect. Was this all just a cruel joke? With every second that passed, that suspicion grew stronger. Half an hour had gone by. The chair across from her remained empty. Meanwhile, giggles from the group of friends nearby rang out, not even bothering to hide. Maybe he saw the name Ella Bennett on the list and ran off right away. Yeah, I mean, a preschool teacher with a meager salary. What's supposed to be attractive about that? Or maybe he'll show up, take one look at her, and walk straight out. That would be hilarious. They covered their mouths as they laughed, but their eyes deliberately darted toward Ella. Every word cut into her pride like a knife. Ella lowered her head, her trembling hand gripping a cold glass of water. Her heart pounded. Embarrassment, anger, and helplessness all tangled together. Why did she let them manipulate her? Why was it always so easy for them to belittle her? Ella took a deep breath, ready to stand up and leave it all behind. But her legs felt glued to the floor. A part of her still clung to a fragile hope that tonight wouldn't end in humiliation. Then the restaurant doors swung open. A cool breeze swept in, followed by the sound of firm, confident footsteps. For a moment, the entire space seemed to fall silent. He walked in, tall, commanding, dressed in a perfectly tailored gray suit. His chiseled face carried features so sharp they demanded every gaze. His deep eyes scanned the room, cold yet holding something that made people afraid to breathe too loudly. Who was he? A VIP guest? A politician? Or one of those CEOs the papers were always writing about? Whispers spread across the restaurant. Even Ella's mocking friends fell silent, their eyes wide, their jaws slack. And then his gaze stopped, right at Ella's table. Her heart skipped a beat. She couldn't believe he was looking at her. Yet the longer it went on, the clearer it became. His eyes were locked on her, unwavering. Why was he looking at her? She didn't even know him. Then he strode forward, decisive. Each step on the polished wooden floor sounded like a pounding drumbeat. He was heading straight for their table, without hesitation. Ella held her breath, clutching the hem of her dress. The group of friends froze, their mocking smiles vanishing, replaced by a look of shock. For a split second, Ella felt as though the entire restaurant was watching her. Every pair of eyes focused on her. She didn't know what was about to happen, but she knew one thing: her life was about to change, because of the arrival of that man. Adrian Cole never intended to come to this restaurant looking for love. He was here for an important client meeting, a quick appointment before returning to the company to deal with the mountain of files waiting on his desk. For Adrian, work was always the top priority, aside from his little daughter Sophie. But the moment he stepped inside, he noticed something unusual. In a corner of the room, a group of young people sat gathered around a table, their laughter ringing out incessantly. And right in the middle of that atmosphere was a girl sitting quietly, her eyes cast down, her trembling hand clutching a glass of water as if trying to hide her shame. Adrian didn't know who she was, but with just one glance, he saw the stark contrast. Amid mocking laughter, her face still held a fragile dignity, like a wildflower crushed underfoot, yet refusing to break. Who was she? Why was she sitting there, allowing herself to be mocked? Adrian's brows furrowed slightly. He despised people who took pleasure in humiliating others. In the ruthless world of business, he had witnessed many dirty games of sabotage. But here, in the middle of a dinner, against a defenseless woman? This wasn't a joke anymore. It was cruel. He watched her for a few more seconds. The simple light blue dress, the worn fabric bag, everything about her seemed out of place in this setting. And yet that very simplicity made her stand out in an extraordinary way. There was a purity about her, untainted, that held his gaze captive. The group burst out laughing again. Maybe he already showed up, saw Ella, and bolted. Laughter roared across the table. Ella lifted her face, her eyes glistening with moisture. But instead of running, she pressed her lips tightly together, her back straightening in a final act of defiance. In that moment, Adrian felt a jolt inside. A woman could have easily crumbled under humiliation, but she chose to hold on to her dignity, and that was exactly what made him unable to turn away. He didn't think any further. In just a few long strides, Adrian headed straight for their table. Every eye in the restaurant followed him, the atmosphere growing heavier. The sound of his shoes striking the polished wood floor was sharp, resolute. The entire group froze like statues. They never imagined that the man walking toward them was Adrian Cole, CEO of Cole Enterprises, the name that financial media praised every day. He stopped right beside Ella. At that moment, Ella looked up, her confused gaze colliding with his deep one. She exhaled sharply, her heart racing. Who was this man? Why was he stopping in front of her? Adrian didn't give her time to think. He bent slightly, taking her trembling hand into his. "Sorry, I'm late." His deep voice rang out clearly above the crowd. "I'm the one you're meeting tonight." The table went silent. Laughter froze on her friends' lips. Some of them widened their eyes, others gaped. Shock spread across the entire room. Ella was stunned. She looked down at the large, warm hand gripping hers, then back up at the chiseled face above. Everything was happening too fast for her to react. What are you saying?" she stammered, her voice so faint only the two of them could hear. Adrian tilted his head, his gaze unwavering, his lips curving into a cold yet certain smile. "Let them think so," he murmured. "Don't worry, I won't let them humiliate you again." Ella's heart tightened. She didn't know why a stranger would step in, nor why his eyes made her want to believe him. Her friends began whispering nervously. "What? What's going on? No way! Isn't that Adrian Cole? Oh my God, CEO Adrian Cole is dating Ella?" The chatter grew louder, but Adrian didn't care. He tightened his hold on Ella's hand, then turned to face the group directly, his gaze icy. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his calm tone carrying enough weight to silence the entire table. No one replied. They lowered their heads, fidgeting awkwardly, as if they had never expected their prank to end this way. Ella sat there, her heart pounding so hard she thought the entire room could hear it. She didn't understand what was happening, but one thing was certain. From this moment on, her life would never be the same. The air in the restaurant grew thick and heavy. Everyone froze when Adrian Cole, the famous CEO everyone knew, suddenly took Ella's hand and introduced himself. "Sorry to keep you waiting. I'm late." The entire table went stiff. Wide eyes, gaping mouths. Everyone had thought this was nothing more than a cruel prank to humiliate Ella. Yet the truth unfolding before them was the exact opposite. Ella was so flustered she could hardly breathe. She shook her head slightly, about to protest. "No, you've got the wrong person." But Adrian's gaze stopped her. In those deep eyes was a resolute message. "Let me handle this." He turned to the group, his voice calm but cold. "Is there a problem? This is clearly our date." No one answered. The mocking laughter was gone. The faces that had been eager to watch Ella's humiliation were now flushed with embarrassment and unease. Adrian calmly pulled out a chair and sat down beside Ella. The action was simple, but it made the entire room pause. A powerful CEO, sitting as though that seat had always belonged to him. Ella sat still, her hands clenched tight, her face burning red. She didn't know whether to feel ashamed or grateful. Who was he to step into her life this way? Adrian called the waiter, his tone composed. "Bring us the menu," and a bottle of white wine. The way he said "us" was like a declaration that they truly were a pair. The atmosphere around the table turned unbearably awkward. The group of friends no longer laughed. Instead, their eyes flickered with envy and doubt. In the middle of it all, Ella's heart raced, torn between confusion and a strange, warming comfort. Throughout the meal, Adrian spoke with Ella. He asked about her work, about the little details of her everyday life. And though she was nervous, Ella answered honestly. Slowly, the awkwardness melted away, replaced by soft laughter, something she never thought she would find in such a situation. When dinner ended, Adrian rose first, extending his hand toward her. "Let's go," he said quietly, his tone calm but leaving no room for refusal. Ella hesitated, glancing at her friends. Their eyes now held no ridicule, only shock and resentment. A flicker of pride surged within her. She placed her hand in his. Adrian gripped it firmly, leading her past the stunned stares, out of the luxurious restaurant, as if declaring to everyone, "She is not a joke. She is with me." Ella walked silently at his side, her heart pounding wildly. She didn't understand what had just happened, nor why a man so powerful had appeared at just the right moment to take her side. But one thing she knew for certain. From the moment Adrian Cole took her hand, Ella Bennett's life would never be the same again. The heavy glass doors of the restaurant closed behind them, leaving behind the whispers that still lingered inside. The night air outside was entirely different, cooler, fresher, but Ella's chest was in turmoil. She yanked her hand free from Adrian's firm grasp. "Wait!" Ella blurted, her voice trembling but sharp with anger. "What did you just do?" Adrian stopped in his tracks. He turned back, the streetlight casting shadows across his chiseled features, his deep eyes fixed on her. "What did I do?" His voice was low, steady, so calm it only made Ella's fury rise. "I saved you from a cheap joke, that's all." "Saved me?" Ella gave a bitter laugh. "Do you have any idea what you just did? You sat down, pretended to be my date, made everyone in that restaurant believe I had something with you. How am I supposed to explain that?" Adrian was silent for a moment, his brows drawing together. He wasn't used to being challenged like this, yet instead of anger, he answered simply, "You don't have to explain anything. Let them think whatever they want." Ella froze. You say that so easily. You won't lose anything. But me? Tomorrow they'll spread every rumor they can think of, mock me 10 times worse." Adrian stepped closer, his gaze sharp as ice. "Trust me, if I hadn't stepped in, they would have hurt you far more than that." Ella's words caught in her throat. He exhaled, shaking his head slightly. "I hate watching someone being humiliated, especially by people who think they have the right to laugh at another's pain. You don't deserve that. So, I chose to stand with you." His voice wasn't raised, not forceful, yet so firm that Ella found herself unable to argue. She stared at him. Beneath the cold exterior, there was something raw, something powerful and sincere that made her chest tighten. But reason screamed at her. "No, this isn't your business. Who is this man anyway? You don't even know him." Clutching her bag tightly, she lowered her voice. "You didn't have to do that. I can protect myself." Adrian arched a brow. "Really? Then why did you sit there in silence while they laughed at you?" Ella's face flushed crimson. The question pierced straight into the weakest part of her heart. She turned away awkwardly, unable to find an answer. Adrian watched her a moment longer, then his tone softened. "I didn't mean to insult you, but I couldn't just sit there and watch." For a few seconds, silence hung between them. Only the distant hum of traffic and the glow of the streetlights remained. Finally, Ella sighed. "Either way, thank you. If it weren't for you, they would have destroyed me tonight." Adrian's lips curved faintly, a fleeting smile like a passing breeze. So quick, Ella wondered if she had imagined it. "No need to thank me. I only did what was right." Ella lowered her head, taking a step back. "In any case, we don't know each other. Let's just call this a coincidence." Tomorrow, forget this ever happened. I will too. Adrian started to speak, but she had already turned, walking quickly toward the nearby bus stop. He stood still, watching her small figure disappear into the crowd on the street. A strange feeling stirred inside him, something between emptiness and something he couldn't quite name. Ella hurried away, but her heart was a storm. She told herself she would never see that man again, because the more she thought of his eyes, the more afraid she was, afraid she might feel something. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. Mornings at Maple Leaf Preschool always carried the scent of warm milk, crayons, and laughter that sparkled like drops of sunlight. Ella opened the door to the Little Stars classroom, carefully fixing the paper flower vase her kids had made the day before. Today's schedule board read, "Welcome, new friend." She adjusted the ribbon hanging at the entrance, reminding herself to pay close attention so the newcomer wouldn't feel out of place. "Miss Ella, I finished the rainbow." Noah ran up, proudly holding a sheet filled with bright colors. "That's beautiful, Noah. Don't forget to add the sun. Rainbows need sunshine too." Ella smiled, tapping her paintbrush against his cheek, leaving a tiny golden dot, then pretending to gasp. Oh no, the sun ran away onto Noah's face. The whole class burst into giggles. A soft knock on the door cut through the cheerful noise. Principal Hart peeked in with a smile. Ella, the new student's parent, just submitted the enrollment forms. Her name is Sophie Cole. She's a bit shy, but very bright and polite. Could you help her feel at home? Of course. Ella took the folder, her eyes pausing for a half second at the surname Cole. But Cole was common enough, she reminded herself. Don't overthink it. A woman in her 50s walked in, a calm, kind presence with the air of a professional caregiver. She held the small hand of a little girl with soft brown hair cut in bangs, a pale pink backpack on her shoulders, adorned with glittery wings. The girl shrank slightly behind her nanny, her big round eyes scanning the room with both curiosity and worry. Hello, Sophie. Ella crouched down so their eyes were level. I'm Miss Ella. Do you want to sit by the window today or in the reading corner? The girl studied Ella for a moment, then her eyes suddenly lit up, as if catching a rare strand of sunlight. Are you the princess teacher? Her voice was small, like a secret, trembling just a little. Ella laughed softly, surprised. A princess? What makes you think that? Sophie tilted her head, pointing at Ella's thin pearl hair clip. You have a little crown, and kind people are princesses. Daddy said so. Ella's heart skipped a beat. Daddy? At that age, the word always softened her. She held out her hand. So does our little princess want to hold the princess teacher's hand for a tour of the castle? Oops, I mean the classroom? Sophie smiled shyly and placed her tiny hand in Ella's. At the slightest touch, she stopped hiding behind the nanny and followed Ella through the learning corners, building blocks, art, and reading. At the stuffed animal shelf, she paused at a floppy-eared bunny. Can I give her a name? You're the first one to ask me that today. What name do you have in mind? Sophie thought hard, lips pursed. Marshmallow, because she's soft and white. Perfect choice. Ella grinned, sticking a little label on the shelf. Marshmallow, named by Sophie. The other kids swarmed around Sophie like a hive of bees. Do you have a cat at home? Do you like Legos or puzzles? What do you eat for breakfast? Sophie took a step back, blinking rapidly, signs she was about to feel overwhelmed. Sensing it, Ella gently rubbed her back. Class, let's play New Friend Leads We All Follow. Sophie, what should we do first? Sophie hesitated, then raised her hands in a heart shape. I want everyone to make a heart and say, welcome, new friend. 20 little hands shot up, paper hearts turning into living ones as the class chorused, welcome, new friend. Sophie giggled, her tension melting like soap bubbles. During watercolor time, Ella passed out aprons and paints. Sophie chose turquoise and lemon yellow, drawing a large circle, the sun, and a tiny figure with a crown. Princess teacher. Beside her, she drew a taller figure with dark brown strokes for hair. Daddy. Is your dad tall? Ella asked, tying Sophie's apron strings. Super tall. But Daddy always bends down, Like this, Sophie crouched in demonstration, then laughed. Daddy says when he's at my eye level, he hears my heart better. Something warm prickled at Ella's eyes. Fathers like that were rare. Her voice softened. Your dad sounds wonderful. At snack time, Sophie sat beside Ella, carefully breaking her cookie in half. Half for you, half for me. Princesses have to share. She bowed her head in a quick prayer, then nibbled like a sparrow. Watching her, Ella felt a tenderness rise inside her, a bond so natural only children seemed able to create it. At nap time, Sophie couldn't fall asleep right away. She turned over, pulled her blanket to her chin, and whispered, Miss Ella, can I lie closer to you? At home, I hold Daddy's hand to sleep. Ella lay on her side, placing her hand by the edge of Sophie's mat. I'm here. You can hold my hand if you'd like, tiny fingers hooked around hers like an anchor to shore, then relaxed. 5 minutes later, Sophie was sound asleep, lashes fluttering softly. When the dismissal bell rang, the room filled with the shuffle of little shoes and shouts of Mommy. Grandma! Ella stood by the door, checking off names. The same nanny returned. Her father had an early meeting, but he managed to come now. He asked me to thank you. No trouble at all, Ella replied, her fingers unconsciously adjusting her pearl hair clip. The glass door in the hallway opened. The steady rhythm of leather shoes echoed closer. A tall, broad-shouldered figure, dressed in a white shirt under a charcoal blazer, stepped in with the receptionist. Late afternoon light cast long stripes across the floor, highlighting the straight bridge of his nose, the depth of his eyes, familiar, almost frighteningly so. Ella froze. For an endless second, time held its breath. Her heart dropped, then pounded so hard it hurt. The man who had taken her hand the night before and led her silently out of the restaurant stood now at the threshold of the Little Stars classroom. Adrian Cole. His jaw tightened for the briefest instant when their eyes met. Anyone else would have missed it, but Ella saw him, a hairline flicker of surprise before his expression settled back into composed calm. Sophie. His voice was low, warm, just like the night before, only gentler now. Sweetheart. Like drawn by a magnet, Sophie sprang from her mat, blanket in hand, wings on her backpack fluttering as she ran. Daddy! She skidded to a stop at the doorway, then spun around to Ella, blanket still trailing in her hand. Princess teacher, this is my daddy. Ella pressed her lips together, her smile trembling. Her throat was dry. She bent down to Sophie's level. I see, Princess. Your daddy's here to pick you up. Sophie grabbed both their hands, pushing them together with all the determination of a 6-year-old heart. The princess and the king have to hold hands so I can stand in the middle. An innocent gesture, a decree as light as a feather yet heavy as stone. Ella's hand brushed against Adrian's. Warm, solid, inexplicably familiar. She pulled back instinctively, but Sophie had already nestled herself between them, satisfied with holding both. Thank you, Miss Bennett, Adrian said, his tone once again calm, the practiced voice of a man who knew how to conceal emotion. The nanny said she did better than expected today. He paused as if weighing his words. I appreciate that. Ella swallowed the meaningless reply hovering on her tongue. Up close, she noticed faint shadows beneath his eyes. The marks not of a boardroom CEO, but of long nights as a single father. The realization warmed her chest in a way she didn't want to admit, and she clasped her hands tightly to steady herself. She adjusted very quickly, Ella said, forcing her tone neutral. Sophie likes to draw. She named the bunny Marshmallow. Marshmallow, Adrian repeated softly, the corner of his mouth twitching as if recalling something tender. That suits her. Daddy, Princess Teacher has a crown. Tomorrow I want to wear it too. Adrian's gaze flicked briefly to Ella's pearl hair clip, then shifted away as though any longer, and he might break a rule he'd set for himself. If your teacher agrees, he said politely. Ella smiled. Only if the princess remembers to share her cookie. Sophie shouted an eager, okay! Then on impulse, threw her arms around Ella in a tight hug, her little body warm with milk and paint. See you tomorrow, Miss Ella. Ella rested her hand on the girl's soft hair, her own voice unexpectedly low. See you tomorrow, Sophie. When Adrian lifted Sophie into his arms, she instinctively rested her head on his shoulder, arms curled around his neck. It was an image so perfect it almost hurt. A tall man in a crisp white shirt, now marked with watercolor smudges, holding a child loved enough to know what safety felt like. Shifting Sophie to his hip, Adrian adjusted her glittery backpack strap with his free hand. He turned to Ella. "If there's anything else I should prepare for class, just bring Sophie's smile," Ella replied before realizing how sincere she sounded. She quickly steered back to professional ground. "And maybe a spare set of clothes. She likes turquoise and lemon yellow." His eyes lit up, the look of a father realizing someone had cared enough to notice his daughter's two favorite colors. "I'll remember," he said quietly. In the hallway, children's goodbyes rang like wind chimes. Adrian nodded in farewell, carrying Sophie toward the door. She looked back, waving, her glittery wings flashing one last time before vanishing behind the glass. Ella stood still long after the sound of his footsteps faded into the city noise. Only then did she realize her palm still carried a trace of inexplicable warmth, from a fleeting handhold a child had forced into being. She exhaled. Last night, she had sworn never to see that man again. This morning, his daughter had called her the princess teacher, and by afternoon, he had appeared at her classroom door like an undeniable fact. Sometimes fate doesn't knock. It throws the door wide open and smiles. The next morning, just as Ella finished placing the children's paper flower vase on the table, Sophie burst into the classroom like a little gust of wind, calling out, "Princess teacher!" "I'm here!" Ella laughed, opening her arms to welcome her, a habit that had formed in only a single day. Sophie hugged her tightly, the little wings on her backpack fluttering with excitement. That embrace made Ella's heart melt as though morning sunlight had poured straight into her chest. But right behind Sophie came another figure, Adrian Cole. He entered with his usual bearing, composed, polished, courteous, his face betraying no emotion. The coldness around him was like a wall of stone, intimidating anyone who thought to come closer. Only Sophie, his little daughter, could cause that wall to crack even slightly. Adrian's eyes lingered on Sophie, clinging to Ella, his brows drawing faintly together. He was not quick to trust anyone, especially when it came to his daughter. To Adrian, Sophie was everything, the one reason he allowed himself to be vulnerable in a brutal, busy life. "She seems to like you," he said, his tone calm but carrying an edge of scrutiny. Ella smoothed Sophie's soft hair before meeting his gaze and answering gently, "She's very bright and full of feeling. I think what she needs most is simply a sense of safety." Something flickered in Adrian's eyes, though he said nothing more. In the days that followed, something unusual happened. Sophie clung to Ella like a shadow. She drew pictures, sang songs, and even insisted on splitting her cookies with the princess teacher. At nap time, she often reached out for Ella's hand, as though only then could she fall asleep peacefully. Adrian noticed everything. He often arrived late for pickup, standing outside the glass door to watch for a few quiet minutes. He saw Sophie laughing uncontrollably when Ella read stories in silly voices. He saw her joining games with confidence, encouraged by that gentle guidance. Previously, Sophie had been shy and reserved, rarely speaking to her classmates on her own. But now she ran, laughed, bloomed like a tiny flower discovering the sun. Adrian couldn't deny it. Ella was making a real difference. One afternoon when he came to pick her up, Sophie wrapped herself around Ella's legs, pleading, "Princess teacher, come play at my house. I want to show you the real marshmallow, not just the stuffed bunny." Ella blushed, flustered. "Oh, little princess, I don't think that's..." Adrian stepped forward, lifting Sophie into his arms, his voice firm but not harsh. "Sophie, you can't pressure your teacher." The girl pouted, resting her head against his shoulder, but whispered softly, "But I like her." Ella heard it. Her heart gave a small, painful throb. She smiled gently, rubbing Sophie's back. "I'll see you tomorrow in class. I promise we'll draw more rainbows together." As father and daughter left, Adrian paused briefly at the door, his gaze turning back to Ella. "Thank you, Miss Bennett." His voice was rough, as though those simple words were harder to say than any billion-dollar deal. Ella blinked, then nodded. "It's my job. And my joy. That night, Adrian sat in his study, the desk lamp casting light over thick stacks of documents. Yet instead of reading reports, his mind drifted back to the colorful classroom where Sophie had laughed and played under Ella's guidance. He remembered his daughter's smile, a rare, radiant smile, brighter than any expensive toy he had ever bought, and he knew its source was that simple woman. Leaning back in his chair, Adrian silently admitted, perhaps for the first time in years, he found himself respecting, maybe even noticing, someone outside of work in Sophie. A preschool teacher, ordinary in every sense, yet warm enough to melt the ice in his daughter's heart, and perhaps in his own. Soul Stories fam, if you're watching on another channel, come home to us at Soul Stories, where tens of thousands of listeners and sharers come together. On Sunday morning, Ella stood in her small apartment kitchen, absent-mindedly rinsing her coffee cup. Weekends were usually her rare chance to catch up on sleep and read. Yet this morning her thoughts kept drifting back to the deep eyes of Adrian Cole at the school picnic the day before. She shook her head hard, scolding herself for being foolish. A famous, cold, powerful CEO. There was no way he'd care about an ordinary preschool teacher like her. The doorbell rang unexpectedly. Ella froze. Who would show up on a Sunday morning? She wiped her hands and went to the door. Her heart stumbled. Standing there was Adrian, tall, composed in a gray shirt. Beside him, Sophie in a floral dress, clutching her stuffed bunny, Marshmallow. "Daddy, see? I told you. Princess Teacher lives here," Sophie squealed, dashing straight into Ella's arms. Ella bent to hug her, her eyes lifting uncertainly toward Adrian. What are you doing here?" Adrian adjusted his cuff, his tone calm. "She insisted on coming to see you. I promised her a picnic today, but Sophie said she wouldn't go without you." Ella's eyes widened, but before she could respond, Sophie gazed up at her with shining eyes, tugging her hand eagerly. "Princess Teacher, please come with us. Please, I want to sit between you and Daddy. I want to eat the sandwiches you made." "But I didn't prepare anything," Ella stammered. "That's fine." Adrian cut in, his voice even, though his eyes carried an unspoken sincerity. "If you're not busy, come with us. Just a simple picnic. It will make her happy." Ella looked down at Sophie. The little girl's lips pouted, her arms tightening around Ella's neck as she whispered, "If you don't come, I don't want to go at all." Ella's heart softened. She sighed. "All right, but only this once." Sophie shouted a triumphant, "Yeah!" and jumped up and down, pulling both of them by the hands. Adrian tilted his head slightly, a flicker of relief passing through his eyes. They arrived at Green Lake Park, a vast open space with endless grass and a lake that mirrored the sky. Adrian spread out the picnic blanket, setting down neatly prepared food containers. Sophie immediately pulled Ella down beside her, as though letting go might make her disappear. "Did you bring your sandwiches?" Ella teased. "I didn't make any today." "That's okay, Daddy made them." "But they're not as good as yours," Sophie replied innocently. Ella laughed while Adrian paused, glancing from his daughter to Ella, his expression unreadable but heavy with meaning. "She really does trust you." All morning, Sophie ran and played. She picked wild daisies to hand proudly to Ella, who tucked them into her hair. Then Sophie insisted on crowning Ella with another bloom. A princess has to wear a flower crown. From a short distance, Adrian stood with his arms folded, quietly observing. He rarely smiled, but in that moment, the corner of his mouth curved faintly. The scene before him looked like a small, peaceful family, something he thought he had lost forever since the day his wife passed away. At noon, they gathered to eat. Sophie lay with her head on Ella's lap, munching on apple slices while listening to fairy tales. Her eyes grew heavy, yet her tiny hand still clung tightly to Ella's fingers. Across from them, Adrian sat silently, watching. He had never seen his daughter so at ease with anyone but him. And that woman, with her soft voice and warm smile, gave Sophie a peace nothing else ever had. His gaze met Ella's for a brief second. Both quickly looked away, but it was long enough to make their hearts skip. By afternoon, Sophie was drowsy from the day's play. On the way home, she dozed in the back seat, Marshmallow tucked tightly in her arms. Ella turned to cover her with a blanket. As she leaned over to fasten the seatbelt, her hand brushed against Adrian's. The moment was brief, but it startled them both. "Thank you for coming today," Adrian said quietly, his eyes fixed on the rear-view mirror where Sophie slept soundly. She laughed more than I've seen her laugh in years. Ella looked at him, her smile tender. "She's a gift. I'm glad I could be there, at least for today." Adrian stayed silent. In his eyes flickered something complex, gratitude and something harder to name. Rumors are like sparks. Just a single gust of wind can set them ablaze. And this time, the fire burned away the fragile peace Ella had just begun to find. Only a few days after the picnic, Ella overheard whispers as she walked past the familiar cafe near the school. "Have you heard that Ella is seeing CEO Adrian Cole?" "Really? A preschool teacher climbing that high?" "Yeah, I heard they were even seen on a picnic with his daughter." She must be clinging tight, hoping to change her life. The giggles that followed made Ella's body go rigid. She kept walking, heart pounding wildly, her face flushed with shame. That afternoon at school, she overheard a few parents talking as they picked up their children. "Let's just hope the teacher doesn't get distracted from her work by her high-class connections." Smart move, really. One step and she could be a rich man's wife. Who wouldn't want that? Ella hugged the stack of files to her chest, her hands trembling. Each cutting remark sliced into her pride like a knife. She knew she hadn't done anything wrong. But who cared? In the eyes of others, a simple preschool teacher standing next to a wealthy CEO was nothing but a fairy tale. And fairy tales to them were jokes to tear apart. That evening, Adrian arrived as usual to pick up Sophie. The little girl rushed to Ella. "Princess teacher, today I drew a picture of the three of us together." Ella forced a smile, taking the paper. But that smile didn't reach her eyes. Adrian noticed instantly. His brow creased. When Sophie ran off to show her drawing to her friends, Adrian stepped closer, lowering his voice. "What happened?" Ella shook her head, her voice hoarse. "Nothing. Take Sophie home." Adrian narrowed his eyes. He wasn't used to being dismissed. And more than that, he had seen her eyes, not cold but wounded, as if she had just lost something precious. He leaned in, meeting her gaze. "Bennett, tell me, who did this?" Ella bit her lip. The emotions she had tried to swallow for days suddenly spilled out. "They say I'm clinging to you for money. I pretend to be kind just to get your attention. Do you understand? I've worked here for years, building my reputation through effort. And now one rumor could destroy it all." Her voice trembled, but her eyes held fragile pride. Adrian was silent. Rumors had never touched him. He had lived in the storm of them for years. But for Ella, it was different. Her world was small, her classroom, her children, and the parents. One stain there would ruin everything. He spoke slowly. "Those people aren't worth your concern." Ella gave a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "Easy for you to say. You're Adrian Cole. But I'm not. I'm just a teacher. I can't let my work and my honor be destroyed just because I was seen standing next to you." In that moment, Adrian understood clearly. Ella was trying to distance herself, not out of dislike, but out of fear. Fear that his presence would drag her into the whirlpool of gossip. His chest tightened. "Bennett," he said, his voice low, almost pleading, "look at me." Ella raised her eyes. In their clear blue depths, he saw a mist of fragility and pride. He had never wanted to protect anyone as much as he did at that moment. But Ella turned away, her voice soft as a whisper in the wind. "I think it's best if we keep our distance." The words struck him like a blade of ice straight to the chest. He didn't answer. He only watched as Ella hurried out of the classroom, her shoulders trembling as she fought to hold herself together. In his eyes, the usual coldness was gone. In its place burned a fierce determination. If the world wants to humiliate her, I will do everything in my power to shield her. The Maple Leaf Preschool Fall Festival arrived with a crisp chill in the air. The schoolyard glowed with colorful flags. Game booths lined the walkways, and the sweet scent of popcorn and cotton candy lingered everywhere. Children scampered about, their laughter bright as bells, while parents gathered in small groups, chatting and snapping photos. Ella busied herself with colleagues at the Rainbow Wheel booth. A smile played on her lips, But inside, her heart was heavy. Since the rumors, she had felt the stares everywhere. Parents whispering behind her back, colleagues carefully avoiding any talk of her situation. She had thought about skipping the festival entirely, but Sophie had been so excited, practicing her song all week, insisting, "Princess Teacher has to watch me sing for good luck." Ella had forced a smile, telling herself she only needed to get through today. When the performances began, Ella stood backstage helping the children prepare. Sophie stepped forward in a pale yellow dress, hair tied into two little ponytails, her eyes shining like stars. She sang the autumn song, her pure voice silencing the entire crowd for a breathless moment. "She's like an angel," a parent murmured. But then came the whispers, sharp as knives. "She's adorable, yes, but didn't her mother pass away? Isn't Miss Bennett just using that to get close to the father?" "That's right, I heard she went on a picnic with him, showing up in private settings too." A teacher behaving like that? Can she really keep her professional ethics? The words spread like ink bleeding across paper. Ella heard everyone, her heart twisting painfully. She forced her smile to stay, but the hand holding the script trembled. Sophie finished her song and bowed. Then she ran straight into Ella's arms. "I did it! Princess Teacher, did I sing well?" Ella knelt, hugging her tightly. "You were the best." Her voice broke, and just then a familiar presence arrived. Adrian Cole. He was late, but the moment he stepped onto the grounds, the atmosphere shifted. Black tailored suit, tall frame, eyes sharp as steel. The crowd rippled with whispers. "That's Adrian Cole. The CEO really came? Isn't he the one rumored with Miss Bennett?" The gossip flared again, fiercer than before. Ella felt the weight of all those stares, shame washing over her. She tightened her grip on Sophie, ready to retreat backstage. But then a warm hand clasped hers, firm, unyielding. She looked up into Adrian's deep, unwavering gaze. He stepped forward, pulling her with him, out into the center of the courtyard. Parents, teachers, students, everyone turned to watch. Adrian stopped where all could see, his voice resonant and commanding. "Enough!" The single word rolled like thunder. Still holding Ella's hand, he swept his gaze over the crowd. "I've heard the whispers. You think she's using me? That she's clinging to me to change her life?" Silence, no one answered, but many flushed and lowered their heads in embarrassment. Adrian drew in a breath, his voice rising with unshakable force. "She doesn't need to cling to anyone. I am the one who needs her." His words rang out like a vow. Ella's chest tightened, her eyes blurring with tears. Adrian turned to her, his gaze softening. "She's the one who made my daughter smile again. Who gave Sophie the courage to make friends and showed her what simple happiness feels like. If anyone needs someone, it's me. I need her." The courtyard fell silent. The flags fluttered in the autumn breeze. Leaves rustled as if the world itself echoed his words. Ella couldn't hold back anymore. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Tears of shame, of relief, of something dangerously close to joy. She said nothing, only nodded, her shoulders trembling. And then Sophie piped up, clear and proud. "I need Princess Teacher too." Laughter rippled through the crowd, easing the heavy tension. Parents averted their eyes in embarrassment. Some nodded quietly, murmuring without the same edge of mockery as before. Adrian squeezed Ella's hand once more, leaning close enough that only she could hear. "Don't be afraid. I won't let anyone hurt you." Ella's tears sparkled as she nodded, and in that moment, surrounded by all those eyes, she felt safer than she ever had before. The festival had ended, but its echo still lingered in Ella's heart. She could not forget the way Adrian's hand had held hers so firmly, nor his voice resonating across the crowd. "I'm the one who needs her." Every time the memory returned, her heart clenched, moved but also afraid. That evening, as she tidied up the classroom, Adrian appeared unexpectedly at the door. He was dressed casually now, no longer the cold CEO in his black suit, but simply a tall, tired man with contemplative eyes. "May I have a few minutes?" His voice was lower, slower than usual. Ella hesitated, then nodded. They sat together on a wooden bench in the schoolyard under the dim golden glow of the lamps. The children's laughter was gone, replaced only by the sound of wind rustling through the trees. Adrian remained silent for a long while before speaking. "I'm not used to doing things like today, standing before a crowd, defending someone, but I don't regret it." Ella lowered her head, her voice unsteady. "You didn't have to. I was afraid it would only bring you more trouble." Adrian shook his head. "Trouble? If anyone should say that, it's me. I'm the one who brought trouble to you." He paused, drawing in a deep breath. When he lifted his gaze, there was something different in his eyes. Fragility, raw and unguarded. "Maybe it's time I tell you about my wife." Ella's breath caught. She sat perfectly still. "She died 5 years ago. A car accident." His voice was hoarse, scraping his throat. "Sophie was only a few months old then. In an instant, I lost my partner and became a father. Alone." He clasped his hands tightly together as if to stop them from trembling. "Those years, I ran a company while learning how to change diapers, make bottles, and rock a baby to sleep. I didn't have time to grieve. I couldn't allow myself to be weak, because Sophie only had me. If I collapsed, she would lose everything." Ella's eyes stung. There was no self-pity in his voice, only the stark truth of a pain buried too long. "You did something extraordinary," she whispered. "Sophie is a wonderful little girl. That is because of you." Adrian gave a faint smile, but it was tinged with a hint of bitterness. "There were times I thought I had failed. Sophie was so shy, withdrawn, and afraid to make friends. I thought, maybe I wasn't good enough. But then you came along, and she changed. For the first time in years, I saw her laugh with joy. That's something I'll always be grateful to you for." Ella fell silent. His words were like a warm wind blowing into the lonely corners of her heart. She inhaled deeply, then admitted softly, "You're not the only one who's been belittled. I have too. Growing up, I was always the joke. My friends laughed because I wasn't stylish, or rich, or special. Even as an adult, they still made me the target of their fun." Her lips trembled, voice breaking. "That night, the blind date was just another cruel trick. They wanted to humiliate me, and I almost accepted it until you showed up." Adrian turned to her. Her eyes were clear, but inside them lay a deep sorrow. He realized they might live in different worlds, wealth, status, power, but they shared the same scars. The pain of loss, of being underestimated, of being forced to stand stronger than they really felt. His voice was low but more sincere than ever. "Ella, you're not a joke. You're the one who's made my world. And Sophie's better. Don't ever let anyone make you believe otherwise." Tears welled in Ella's eyes. She had never imagined hearing words like these, especially from a man admired by the world. Through her tears, she laughed softly. "You don't know. This is the first time someone has ever truly stood up for me. The first time I don't feel small and worthless." Adrian gently touched the back of her hand. Just a brief touch, but within it was a depth of understanding. "Then, let me keep standing by you, at least as a friend." Ella nodded, a tear falling even as a radiant smile broke across her face. In that moment, two souls scarred by the past began to find a sense of harmony. On a crisp autumn night, under the soft golden glow, they were no longer just a CEO and a teacher. There were two people, learning how to heal each other. A week had passed since that quiet evening on the schoolyard bench. Yet Ella still remembered Adrian's eyes when he said, "Let me keep standing by you, at least as a friend." The words were simple, but they had planted a seed in her heart, one that had quietly begun to sprout. She told herself not to let her heart wander, that the distance between their worlds was far too great. And yet every morning when Sophie ran into the classroom, wrapping her arms around her and calling, "Princess Teacher," the seed pushed out another fragile shoot, no matter how hard Ella tried to deny it. One afternoon, as most of the children had already been picked up, Adrian arrived earlier than usual. He wasn't in his tailored suit this time, but in a light sweater, his appearance softer, less guarded. "Sophie's still coloring," Ella said gently, nodding toward the corner of the room. Adrian gave a small nod, then hesitated. "Tonight, Are you free? Ella froze. The question was too sudden. Why? Dinner. His answer was direct, his gaze steady. Not for work, not for rumors, just a real date. Ella bit her lip. Fear stirred inside her, but so did a spark of anticipation she couldn't hide. After a few seconds of silence, she gave the faintest nod. The restaurant this time was nothing like the extravagant place from that disastrous blind date. It was a small riverside bistro with soft, golden lights and wooden tables. When she walked in, Ella whispered in surprise, "You chose this place. I thought you'd be more used to luxury." Adrian's lips curved faintly. Sometimes the simplest things feel the most real. They sat across from each other for the first time, without pretense or playing roles. The waiter brought a bottle of white wine, steaming bowls of pasta, and crisp bread. There were no prying eyes, no whispers, only the gentle sound of jazz in the background. Ella studied him, seeing him up close without the cold, impenetrable wall he usually carried. In the warm light, his face no longer seemed so severe. There was weariness there, thoughtfulness, and above all, sincerity. "Do you come here often?" Ella asked, swirling her glass. "Sometimes," he admitted. "This used to be where my wife and I came." Ella froze slightly. Adrian noticed, but he didn't avoid the truth. "Tonight, I wanted to make a new memory." His gaze locked with hers, his voice steady. Ella's heart stumbled into chaos. She quickly looked down, pretending to focus on her food. Over dinner, they talked more than they ever had. Ella shared stories of her childhood in a small town, her dream of becoming a teacher since she was a little girl. Adrian listened, sometimes even laughing softly at her innocent anecdotes. When it was his turn, he spoke about Sophie. The first time she called him daddy for real, the night she had a fever that terrified him, the countless evenings he signed contracts with a baby cradled in his arms. His voice in those moments was not that of a cold CEO, but of an ordinary father, tired, vulnerable, overflowing with love. Ella listened intently, her eyes shining. She had never imagined Adrian Cole, the powerful man admired by the world, could have such fragile human moments. When dessert arrived, they both laughed to discover they had chosen the same dessert. Tiramisu. Ella teased, "Maybe we have more in common than I thought." Adrian tilted his head, his deep gaze piercing the last defenses around her heart. "The biggest thing we share is that we both need someone who truly listens." Ella didn't answer, but her cheeks burned and her hand gripped the tiny spoon a little too tightly. Afterward, they walked slowly along the stone path by the river. The night breeze cool against their skin, autumn leaves scattered beneath the lamplight. Adrian suddenly stopped. His voice was lower, gentler than usual. "Thank you for saying yes tonight. After everything that's happened, you could have turned me down." Ella smiled faintly, lifting her gaze to the starlit sky. "Maybe I just wanted to know what a real date would feel like." Their eyes met. Neither spoke, but both hearts beat faster. Adrian extended his hand, not forceful, not demanding, simply an invitation. Ella hesitated for a moment, then placed her hand in his. His hand was warm, steady, wrapping around hers with a strength that felt like safety. Autumn drifted by peacefully, as if happiness was finally beginning to smile upon Ella. Sophie grew increasingly attached to her, and Adrian seemed less cold. His eyes at times even glimmered with a warmth that left Ella flustered. But it only takes one gust of wind to shatter everything. And this time, the gust came stronger than anyone could have foreseen. On Friday afternoon, as Ella was preparing for art class, she overheard whispers from the teacher's lounge. "Did you hear? A woman came looking for Adrian Cole at his company. Supposedly, his late wife's younger sister." "Really? I thought that side of the family had cut ties long ago." "Word is, she's back to fight for custody of little Sophie." Ella's hand trembled, the crayon dropping from her fingers to the floor. She bent down to pick it up, her heart pounding wildly. His late wife's sister, fighting for Sophie's custody? That evening, when Adrian arrived to pick Sophie up, Ella noticed the tension radiating from him. His shoulders were rigid, his eyes sharp as steel. Sophie still chattered happily, showing him her drawings, but Adrian only gave a faint smile, holding her hand firmly as they left in haste. Ella stood frozen, her chest heavy with unease. 2 days later, the headlines exploded across every news outlet. Shock at Cole Enterprises, late wife's sister returns, demands custody of Sophie Cole. The mysterious Vanessa Grant, protective aunt or manipulative opportunist? It didn't stop there. Some tabloids dragged Ella into it. Ordinary kindergarten teacher catches CEO's eye, fit to be stepmother? Paparazzi photos of Ella holding Sophie's hand in the park or standing beside Adrian at the school festival were plastered under captions like, "Proof of intimacy." When Ella saw them, she felt dizzy, her chest tightening, her throat closing. She hadn't done anything wrong. She was simply doing her job, caring for a child. Yet now she was being cast as a villain at the center of a storm. The next day, Vanessa appeared at the school. She was in her early 30s with auburn waves framing her face, wearing an elegant designer dress. Her steps were confident, her eyes razor sharp. When her gaze landed on Ella, her lips curled in a half smile, half sneer. "You're Ella Bennett, aren't you?" Her voice was ice. "Yes, I'm Sophie's teacher. Did you want to see her?" Vanessa gave a mocking laugh. "No, I came to see you. I hear you've gotten close to my niece. Close enough, she calls you princess. How amusing." Ella straightened her back, keeping her composure. "Sophie is just a child. What she calls me is her choice. I would never exploit her feelings." "Choice, you say?" Vanessa arched a brow. "Know this, Ella Bennett. I won't allow some stranger to wedge her way into this family. My brother-in-law may be blind, but I'm not. Sophie needs blood, not some kindergarten teacher." The words struck Ella like a slap. She clenched her fists but said nothing. Vanessa leaned closer, her whisper venomous. "Enjoy these short-lived days. Soon I'll take Sophie away. And when that happens, the name Ella Bennett will vanish from her life." Ella stood there stunned. That evening, online forums and social media erupted. Vanessa Grant declares Ella Bennett is unfit to be Sophie's role model. Public divided. Can an ordinary teacher ever be worthy of joining the Cole family? Edited photos of Ella spread like wildfire. Cruel comments flooded in. So nowadays, teachers climb their way up to become society wives. Poor Sophie, stuck with such a pathetic excuse for a stepmother. In her small apartment, Ella sat trembling, the newspaper crumpling in her fists. Tears spilled over. She had never felt so small, so helpless. Why had it come to this? All she ever wanted was to love and guide children. She had never tried to step into that glittering, merciless world, and yet now every gaze was on her, scrutinizing, judging, condemning. Meanwhile, Adrian read the articles, his face darkening. He slammed the paper onto the table, his eyes blazing. Vanessa had dared to return, dared to drag the media into it, dared to slander Ella, the woman he knew was pure and genuine. This time he knew he could not remain silent. Thank you for being part of Soul Stories. If you're listening on another channel, come back to the official home so you can continue our love journeys together with the Soul Stories family. The news still flooded the papers. Every time Ella stepped outside, she felt the prying eyes and heard the whispers tossed at her like stones. She tried to ignore them, but her pride was being shredded piece by piece. One evening after classes ended, Ella sat alone in the classroom, staring at Sophie's painting pinned to the wall, 3 figures holding hands beneath a rainbow. The child's smiling face in that picture blurred her vision with tears. Sophie didn't deserve this. Neither did Adrian. Ella made a decision. She had to end it. The next day, when Adrian came to pick Sophie up, Ella stepped outside the school gates to stop him. "We need to talk." She drew a deep breath, her voice trembling but firm. Adrian looked at her, his eyes sharp but edged with worry. "I was coming to find you too." Ella lowered her head, her hands clenched tightly. "Adrian, this has gone too far. The press, the gossip. Vanessa, I don't want Sophie trapped in this storm, and I don't want to become a burden to you." Adrian's brows furrowed, and he stepped closer. "A burden? Ella, is that what you think you are? Isn't it true?" Her voice cracked as tears spilled over. Since the moment I appeared, the rumors haven't stopped. They call me a leech, a gold digger. I don't want to ruin your reputation, and I don't want Sophie turned into a laughingstock. Adrian was silent for a long moment, his eyes darkening. Then his voice dropped, low and unyielding. Listen to me, Ella. Sophie needs you, and I do too. Ella's head snapped up. His gaze no longer held its cold fortress. It burned with fierce conviction. You've given Sophie the laughter I couldn't. You've helped her grow braver, helped her learn to trust and open her heart. And you've made me, for the first time in years, feel like I'm not alone. And you call yourself a burden? No, Ella. You are the most precious thing I can't afford to lose. Tears streamed down Ella's cheeks. She shook her head. But words are easy. The world out there won't stop. Adrian's lips curved into a cold, determined smile. Then I'll prove it with action. The very next day, Adrian called an emergency press conference at Cole Enterprises headquarters. Hundreds of reporters crowded the hall, their cameras flashing as broadcasts aired live across the nation. Adrian strode out, tall and commanding in his black suit, his face set in steel. Beside him was Ella, nervous and overwhelmed, but his hand closed firmly around hers, giving her strength. Standing before the microphone, his deep voice rang through the room. Recently, there have been countless false rumors about myself, my daughter, and Miss Ella Bennett. Today, I intend to set the record straight. The tension was suffocating. Reporters poised pens and recorders, waiting. Adrian spoke clearly, each word deliberate. Ella Bennett has never taken advantage of me. On the contrary, I am the one who found peace in her. She has brought happiness to my daughter and has been my anchor through difficult days. If anyone is dependent here, it's me. I need her. Camera shutters exploded in a storm of flashes. Adrian squeezed Ella's hand, his eyes cutting straight into the cameras. I don't care about rumors. I care about the truth. She is part of our lives, and I will protect her with everything I have. The room froze in stunned silence before erupting into a frenzy of murmurs. Reporters surged forward with questions, but Ella barely heard them. All she could feel was the warmth of Adrian's hand enclosing hers, a silent vow. That evening, Ella sat in her small apartment, the TV flickering in front of her. On the screen, images replayed again and again. Adrian at the podium, holding her hand, declaring to the world, I need her. Tears welled up once more, but this time not from pain, from the profound weight of being trusted and cherished. She whispered to herself, maybe this time I don't have to run anymore. That night, the city glittered with lights as it hosted the annual charity gala, sponsored by Cole Enterprises. The event brought together not only business leaders, but also celebrities, media figures, and some of the most influential names in society. The grand hall sparkled under crystal chandeliers, glasses of wine shimmered, and gowns sparkled as guests moved elegantly across the floor. Ella was there only because Adrian wanted her to be. She had hesitated for a long time, but Sophie had begged with bright eyes. Princess Teacher, please come. I want to show the whole world that you're with me. And Ella simply couldn't refuse. She wore a simple pale blue dress, hardly dazzling among the glittering crowd. But the moment she stepped inside, eyes turned toward her. Some were curious, some were scrutinizing, and some were doubtful. Adrian never left her side. His hand held hers firmly, silently reassuring her. The event reached its climax when the host invited Adrian to the stage for his speech. The hall immediately fell silent. Every camera turned toward him. Adrian stood tall, commanding, his deep voice filling the room. Cole Enterprises has faced a year full of challenges, but also great meaning. Tonight, I want to thank those who have stood by me, especially the two most important people in my life, my daughter, Sophie, and a woman. The room buzzed instantly. Ella froze in her seat, her heart racing wildly. Adrian drew a deep breath, then suddenly stepped away from the podium. He walked directly down the aisle, his eyes fixed on a single person, Ella. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath as he stopped before her. Without hesitation, Adrian knelt on the red carpet. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed like lightning, catching every angle. Adrian lifted his gaze, his deep eyes steady, his voice ringing out clear and unwavering. Ella Bennett, the first time we met, I pretended to be your date just to shield you from ridicule. But tonight, I'm not pretending. Ella's chest tightened. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You came into my life and changed everything. You gave Sophie her laughter back. You brought light into days I thought would remain dark forever. And you made my heart beat again, a gift I thought I had lost for good. From his pocket, he pulled out a velvet box. Inside was a simple yet elegant ring, shining under the lights. Before everyone here, I want to ask you, Ella, will you marry me? Will you become my wife? Will you be our family? Time froze. The hall fell into utter silence. No whispers, no laughter, just stunned stillness, as if the world itself had stopped. It was just like that first blind date, when Adrian had taken Ella's hand to protect her from a cruel joke. The world had gone silent then too, but this time it wasn't an act. It wasn't a temporary shelter. This was real. Ella lifted her trembling hand to her mouth, tears streaming, but her smile glowed brighter than ever. She no longer saw the cameras flashing, the eyes watching, only the man kneeling before her, his gaze steady and true. She nodded, strong but trembling. Yes, I will. The hall erupted. Applause thundered, cheers and whistles filled the air, and some even wiped away tears. A few journalists whispered breathlessly, "This will be the headline of the decade." Adrian rose, a rare smile breaking across his face. He slipped the ring onto Ella's finger and pulled her into his arms. At that moment, Sophie came running from across the room, her little shoes clattering against the floor. She threw her arms around them both, her face glowing with joy. "Now I really have a family!" Ella wept openly, holding them close. Adrian's arms wrapped around them both, strong and unshakable. The lights shone down, casting a golden halo around the three of them. Spring arrived carrying the scent of flowers and a gentle blue sky. A small chapel on the city's outskirts was decorated with simple beauty. White ribbons, baskets of daisies and roses, rows of wooden pews bathed in sunlight. There was no extravagance, no blinding spectacle, only sincerity in every detail. Ella stood in the little waiting room, wearing a delicate lace wedding gown. It wasn't an expensive designer piece, just a simple dress. Yet when she looked in the mirror and saw the sparkle in her own eyes, she had never felt more beautiful. Her heart fluttered, full of nerves and joy. The door opened and Sophie appeared in a tiny white dress, her head crowned with a daisy wreath. She held a small bouquet in her hands, her eyes glowing. "Princess teacher, no, Princess mommy, do I look pretty?" Ella laughed through her tears, pulling her into a hug. "You're the most beautiful angel I've ever seen." Sophie whispered, "Today our family will really be complete, won't it, Mommy?" Ella nodded, her eyes glistening. The music began. Slowly, Ella walked down the aisle. The wooden doors opened wide, golden light pouring in, and at the far end stood Adrian. He wore a black suit, his expression solemn, but his eyes softened the moment they met hers. In that instant, the world around them faded. It felt as though only the two of them existed. Step by step, Ella moved toward him, as if in a dream. When her hand slipped into his, Adrian held it firmly, his gaze trembling with emotion. The ceremony was warm and intimate. When the priest asked, "Do you take this man to walk beside you for the rest of your life?" Ella looked straight into Adrian's eyes, her voice unsteady but sure. "I do." And when it was Adrian's turn, his deep voice resonated. "I do. Not just today, but for a lifetime." When the priest declared, "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the little chapel burst into applause. Adrian leaned down and kissed Ella softly. It wasn't hurried passion. It was a whispered vow, tender and sacred. At that exact moment, Sophie ran joyfully up the aisle, tossing white petals into the air and shouting, "We're really a family now." Laughter rang out, some guests wiping their eyes. Ella gathered Sophie into her arms, and Adrian embraced them both. Under the shower of white petals, they stood as one, no longer fragments, but whole. The reception was held in the chapel's garden, wooden tables, small lanterns hanging from branches, and children laughing as they played. Sophie twirled in her dress, dancing with her friends, her face brighter than ever. Adrian gently pulled Ella aside to a quiet corner lit by lantern light. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, his voice a soft murmur at her ear. "That night, at the blind date, I only wanted to protect you. But now I know. I love you for life." Ella turned, tears streaming, but her smile radiant. "And I love you too. I never thought I would find love this great." Adrian kissed her again, just as Sophie called out from across the garden. "Mommy, Daddy, come dance with me." They both laughed, taking each other's hands and stepping out to join her. Beneath the lantern glow, surrounded by laughter and love, a real family was finally written into being, not by cruel jokes or harsh rumors, but by sincerity, trust, and an unbreakable love.